As darkness falls, the sky becomes a canvas painted with stars. Each pinpoint of light has traveled across unimaginable distances, some for thousands of years, others for millions, simply to reach your eyes on this quiet evening. Tonight, we will wander together through that vast, glittering tapestry, exploring how ancient peoples saw stories in the stars, how artists tried to capture their light, and what science now tells us about the celestial fires burning silently above. So settle in, let your shoulders soften, and let the night sky carry you slowly, gently towards sleep. Welcome to Let's Learn While You Sleep. Tonight, we drift together beneath an open sky where the stars have been quietly waiting, as they have for billions of years, to tell their story. The Starry Night is perhaps the oldest art gallery in human experience, a ceiling of light shared by every civilization that has ever lived, every dreamer who has ever looked up. Across the next gentle hour, we will explore how the cosmos became a canvas, how painters like Vincent van Gogh tried to translate its motion into pigment, how astronomers slowly decoded the meaning of starlight, and how the science of darkness, atmosphere, and human vision shapes the shimmering sky we see. There is nothing for you to do, nothing to remember. Simply listen, breathe, and let the slow current of words carry you outward, past the rooftops, past the clouds, into the soft and infinite dark, where the stars are always burning. Long before there were telescopes, before written language, before cities or wheels or fire pits arranged in tidy rings, our ancestors stared upward at the same stars you can see tonight. The patterns they traced, what we now call constellations, were among humanity's earliest works of imagination, drawn not on stone or parchment, but onto the dome of the night itself. Consider for a moment how strange and how beautiful this is. A scattering of distant suns, separated from one another by trillions of kilometers, having no real connection in space, were gathered by the human mind into hunters and bears, dragons and serpents, kings and queens. The stars themselves did not change. Only the eyes that watched them did. In ancient Mesopotamia, more than 4,000 years ago, scribes pressed cuneiform records into damp clay, listing constellations like the Bull of Heaven and the Lion. Many of these patterns flowed westward, and eventually became the zodiac we still recognize today. In Egypt, the goddess Nut was imagined as a woman arching her starry body across the sky, swallowing the sun each evening and giving birth to it again at dawn. In Polynesia, navigators memorized hundreds of stars to cross thousands of kilometers of open ocean, reading the heavens like a living map. And in the Andes, the Inca looked not only at the bright stars, but at the dark dust lanes within the Milky Way, naming the shadowed shapes between the lights: a llama, a serpent, a fox, patterns invisible to those unfamiliar with their tradition. What unites all of these visions is the simple, profound act of looking up. The night sky offered no instructions, it demanded interpretation. And so, across every continent, humans began to read the darkness as if it were the oldest book ever written, a book whose pages turn with the seasons, whose chapters are the slow procession of the constellations, and whose words, even now, glimmer faintly above your roof tonight. Now consider the painter, standing alone at his window in the small French town of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in June of 1889. Vincent van Gogh, then 36 years old, was a patient at the asylum of Saint-Paul-de-Morzol, recovering from a period of profound mental anguish. From his second-floor room, with iron bars across the glass, he could see the pre-dawn sky stretching above the village. And somewhere in that quiet darkness, he began to paint what would become one of the most beloved images in human history: the Starry Night. The painting is in many ways a wonder of careful invention. The village beneath the sky was largely imagined, drawn from memory rather than observation. The cypress tree in the foreground, twisting upward like a dark green flame, maybe a single tree he could see, exaggerated into something almost cosmic. And the sky itself, those churning spirals of blue and gold, the great swirling current weaving between the stars, is not a literal record of any night, but an emotional one. And yet, astronomers have studied it, and they note something striking. The bright object below the moon may correspond to the planet Venus, which was indeed shining brilliantly in the pre-dawn sky during that very week of June 1889. Some researchers have even suggested that the swirling forms resemble patterns found in turbulent fluid flow, a phenomenon mathematicians describe with equations Van Gogh could not have known. Whether or not the resemblance is intentional, it hints at something deep. Van Gogh, with brush and oil, may have intuited the same hidden patterns the universe itself uses to organize gas, water, and starlight. He once wrote to his brother Theo that looking at the stars always made him dream, and tonight, looking up at the same constellations he saw, you might feel a thread connecting you to that small barred window. To that man, awake before dawn, trying with all his heart to translate the quiet language of the sky into something a human soul could keep. What, truly, is a star? When you tilt your head back tonight and gaze upward, what are those silver pinpricks really made of? And why do they shine so steadily across the dark? A star, in the simplest possible terms, is a vast sphere of hot gas, mostly hydrogen, some helium, and trace amounts of heavier elements, held together by its own immense gravity. At the center of every star, including our own sun, the pressure is so extreme and the temperature so enormous, often more than 15 million degrees Celsius in the core, that the nuclei of hydrogen atoms slam together and fuse into helium. This process, called nuclear fusion, releases staggering quantities of energy, and that energy slowly, patiently, makes its way outward through the star's interior. Consider this gentle astonishment. A single photon of light born in the sun's core can take, by some estimates, between 100,000 and several 100,000 years to reach the sun's surface, bouncing endlessly between particles in the dense plasma. But once it escapes into space, it travels at the speed of light, roughly 299,792 kilometers per second, and reaches Earth in about 8 minutes and 20 seconds. The starlight you see tonight from more distant suns has been traveling far longer. Light from the bright star Sirius left its source about 8.5 years ago. Light from the stars of the Big Dipper has been crossing space for roughly 80 to 100 years, depending on the star. And the faint glow of the Andromeda galaxy, just visible to the naked eye on a dark night, began its journey toward you about 2.5 million years before any human civilization existed. So when you stand beneath the stars, you are not really looking at the sky as it is now. You are looking at the sky as it was. A layered tapestry of moments, each star showing you a different age of the universe, all woven together in a single, quiet glance. And yet, the stars are not the only artists at work in the night sky. The atmosphere itself, that thin and invisible blanket of air surrounding our world, is constantly shaping what you see, softening the light, tinting it, making it tremble. Have you ever noticed how stars seem to twinkle while planets shine with a steadier glow? That gentle shimmering you see is not happening at the star itself, 8 light years or 80 light years away. It is happening just above your head, within the few hundred kilometers of restless atmosphere through which the starlight must pass before reaching your eye. Astronomers call this effect atmospheric scintillation. As starlight enters the atmosphere, it travels through layers of air at slightly different temperatures and densities. These layers act like soft, shifting lenses, bending the light in tiny ways many times per second. Because a star is so far away that it appears as a single point of light, even the smallest disturbance can make it dance. Planets, by contrast, appear to us as tiny disks rather than points, and the disturbances tend to average out, leaving them calm and steady. The same atmosphere is also responsible for the sky's deep color. Sunlight is made of all the colors of the rainbow blended together, and air molecules, mostly nitrogen and oxygen, scatter the shorter blue wavelengths far more strongly than the longer red ones. This is why the daytime sky is blue, and why, as the sun sinks toward the horizon, its light passes through more atmosphere, scattering away the blue and leaving the warm reds and oranges of sunset. After sunset, as the sky cools into deeper indigo, the stars slowly emerge, one by one, like notes in a quiet symphony being tuned. Consider how, in this delicate way, the air above us behaves not as a barrier, but as a translator, softening, coloring, and making intimate the unimaginable distances of space, transforming raw cosmic light into the tender, twinkling sky that has comforted human beings for as long as we have had eyes to look up. Let us return now to that quiet room in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, where Vincent van Gogh painted the Starry Night in June of 1889. He was, at the time, a voluntary patient at the Saint-Paul-de-Moselle Asylum, a former monastery nestled among olive groves and limestone hills. From the east-facing window of his small upstairs room, he could see a fragment of the sky before sunrise, and he wrote often to his brother Theo about the views he glimpsed there. In one letter, he described the morning star, blazing very large in the dawnlight, and many art historians believe this brilliant point in the painting is the planet Venus, which was indeed visible in the pre-dawn sky over Provence during that very month. Consider for a moment what it meant to paint such a sky. Van Gogh did not paint exactly what he saw. He painted what he felt the sky to be: turbulent, alive, breathing with motion. The cypress in the foreground rises like a dark green flame. The village below sleeps beneath red-tiled roofs, and above it, all the heavens churn in great spiraling currents of yellow and white. He painted from memory and imagination as much as observation, blending the real stars he had studied with an inner vision of how the cosmos might look if its hidden energies became suddenly beautifully visible. And here we touch upon something profound. The painting was made during a period of deep personal suffering, yet it radiates wonder rather than despair. Van Gogh once wrote that looking at the stars always made him dream, and that just as we take a train to travel to a distant town, perhaps we take death to reach a star. It is a tender, searching thought. He was reaching, through paint and pigment, towards something larger than himself, toward the same vast, patient sky that had watched over every human being who ever lived. And tonight, that same sky watches over you, unchanged in its essence, its ancient light still falling softly across the rooftops of every sleeping town on Earth. Look more closely now at those great spiraling forms that dominate the upper half of the painting. For more than a century, viewers have wondered what Van Gogh was depicting in those swirling currents of light. Were they purely imagined? Were they a stylized impression of clouds, or wind, or the artist's inner turmoil rendered visible? In the year 2004, the Hubble Space Telescope released an image of a distant star called V838 Monocerotis, surrounded by an expanding cloud of dust, illuminated by a tremendous flash of light. The shapes within that cloud, swirling and curling in luminous spirals, bore an uncanny resemblance to the eddies in Van Gogh's sky. Astronomers and art lovers alike were quietly astonished. Of course, Van Gogh could not have known about such cosmic phenomena. The Hubble telescope would not be launched until 1990, more than a century after his death. And yet, somewhere in that resemblance, there is a mystery worth lingering on. Some researchers have proposed something even more remarkable. In 2006, a team of physicists studying the mathematical structure of turbulence noticed that the patterns of brightness in the Starry Night appear to follow a statistical distribution similar to that found in true turbulent fluid flow. The kind of chaotic motion seen in rivers, in atmospheres, in the swirling gases around stars. This finding remains a subject of discussion among scientists, and it is not certain whether Van Gogh's brushwork genuinely captures real turbulence, or whether the resemblance is partial and intuitive, but it suggests something gentle and beautiful, that the artist, simply by looking deeply at the world, may have intuited patterns that science would only later describe in equations. And perhaps this should not surprise us. The same physics that stirs the wind through olive trees stirs the gas around distant suns. The same mathematics that shapes a swirling stream shapes the spiral arms of galaxies. Van Gogh, standing at his asylum window, gazing at a sky he could only partly see, may have been touching something universal, a hidden grammar of motion that runs through all of nature, from the smallest eddy to the grandest galaxy. Now drift your attention, slowly, to the moon in the upper right corner of the painting. Van Gogh rendered it as a brilliant crescent surrounded by a great halo of yellow light, glowing as though it possessed its own inner fire. In truth, the moon does not generate its own light. It shines only because it reflects the light of the sun, casting back roughly 12% of the sunlight that falls upon its dusty grey surface. And that surface, as we now know, is a quiet world of cratered plains, ancient lava flows, and powdery regolith, the the fine soil churned by billions of years of meteorite impacts. The Moon is, on average, about 384,000 kilometers from Earth, a distance so vast that the light reflected from its surface takes a little over 1 second to reach your eyes. Consider what this means. When you step outside on a clear night and look up at the Moon, you are not seeing it as it is in this exact moment. You are seeing it as it was a heartbeat ago. Every glance at the night sky is a small act of time travel. The light from the sun takes about 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach the Earth. The light from the nearest star beyond our sun, Proxima Centauri, takes roughly 4 years and 3 months. And the light from some of the faintest stars you can see with the naked eye has been traveling toward you for thousands of years, set out across the darkness long before any of the cities below were built, long before any human alive today drew breath. When Van Gogh painted his glowing moon, he was painting an object whose light had already left it before his brush ever touched the canvas. And the light from that very same moon, falling tonight on your window, on your skin, on the page of any book you might be reading, is light that began its journey when the world was just slightly younger and has now arrived at last here with you. Let us turn our gaze then to the 11 brilliant points of light scattered across the painted sky. Van Gogh placed his stars with care, each one rendered as a glowing orb wrapped in a halo of radiating colour. The night skies of late 19th century Provence were extraordinarily dark by modern standards, free from the artificial glow that washes out the stars above most cities today. On a truly dark night, far from electric lights, the human eye can perceive somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 individual stars, scattered like grains of luminous sand across the deep velvet of the sky. And every one of those points of light is a sun, some smaller and cooler than our own, glowing dim red, others vast and brilliant blue-white, hundreds of times more massive, burning through their fuel in mere millions of years, rather than the leisurely billions of our quieter sun. Astronomers classify stars by their color and temperature into a sequence of spectral types, often remembered by the mnemonic O, A, F, G, K, M, ranging from the hottest blue giants down to the coolest red dwarfs. Our sun is a G-type star, modest, yellow-white, middle-aged, expected to shine steadily for perhaps another 5 billion years before swelling into a red giant in the long, slow story of its later life. And among the stars Van Gogh painted, there is no way to know exactly which real stars he had in mind, or whether they correspond to specific constellations visible from his window in June of 1889. Some scholars have tried to map the painting to the actual night sky of that month, and have found loose correspondences, while others suggest the arrangement is more poetic than astronomical. Either way, when you look at those 11 painted lights tonight, you are looking through the eyes of a man who, despite his suffering, found in the stars something tender and reliable, a quiet companionship that asked nothing of him, and offered, simply by existing, a sense that he was held within something far greater than his own brief, luminous life. Beneath those 11 luminous points, the village rests in quiet geometry, a small cluster of houses nestled into the dark folds of the valley floor. Notice how the rooftops slope gently downward, their pale blues and weary greys softened by the night, and how the warm yellow light glows from a few small windows, suggesting lives still awake within the stillness. At the center of this little settlement rises a slender church spire, taller than anything around it, reaching upward like a needle pointed toward the heavens. Art historians have long observed that this spire does not match the churches of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, where Vincent painted this scene from his asylum room. Instead, it resembles the steeples of his native Netherlands, the country he had left behind years before. Some scholars suggest that Vincent painted this spire from memory, weaving a fragment of his Dutch homeland into the Provençal landscape, perhaps as an unconscious gesture of longing. And yet, the spire serves another purpose as well, one purely visual. It is the only sharp vertical in the lower half of the painting, a quiet anchor amid the gentle horizontal flow of houses and hills. Without it, the eye would have nowhere to rest before being lifted upward into the great turbulence of the sky. With it, our gaze travels naturally from the village, up the spire, and onward into the swirling cosmos above. Consider, for a moment, the relationship Vincent had with churches during this period of his life. He had once trained as a preacher, walking among coal miners in Belgium, sharing in their poverty. He had grown disillusioned with organized religion, yet he never lost his hunger for the sacred. In his letters to his brother Theo, Vincent wrote of finding consolation not within church walls, but beneath open skies, among stars and cypresses and wheat fields stretching to the horizon. Somewhere in that darkness, the painted village sleeps unaware of the cosmic storm above, and the small spire stands quietly, a memory of home, a relic of faith, a slender bridge between earth and sky. Now, let your eyes drift toward the left edge of the canvas, where a great dark shape rises from the earth and stretches upward into the sky like a green flame frozen in the act of burning. This is the cypress tree, and it is one of the most extraordinary elements in the entire painting. Cypresses had become an obsession for Vincent in the final years of his life. In a letter to his brother Theo, written in June of 1889, he described them with unusual reverence, saying they were as beautiful in line and proportion as an Egyptian obelisk, and that no one had yet painted them as he saw them. To Vincent, the cypress was both magnificent and melancholy, a tree associated across many Mediterranean cultures with cemeteries and mourning, a living monument to the dead. And yet, in this painting, the cypress is anything but still. It twists and writhes upward, its dark green flames licking toward the swirling sky, as though Earth itself were reaching toward the cosmos in some silent yearning. Notice how the cypress breaks the boundary between land and sky, how it alone, among all the painting's elements, connects the sleeping village below to the turbulent heavens above. It is a vertical bridge, a conduit, a pathway. Some art historians have read this as a deeply symbolic gesture, perhaps even a meditation on death itself. Vincent had written, just weeks before painting Starry Night, that looking at the stars always made him dream, and that just as we take a train to reach a distant town, we take death to reach a star. The cypress, then, may be that journey made visible, a green road rising from the soil of the living toward the brilliant fires of eternity. Whether or not Vincent intended this exact meaning, the visual effect is undeniable. The cypress draws our gaze upward, dissolves the line between the earthly and the cosmic, and reminds us that everything in this painting, every house, every star, every brushstroke, exists in unbroken continuity with everything else. Let us pause now and consider the brushwork itself. For in the Starry Night, the very texture of the paint becomes part of its meaning. If you were to stand before this canvas in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where it has hung since 1941, you would see that Vincent applied his oils thickly in a technique called impasto. Ridges of paint rise from the surface, casting tiny shadows beneath gallery lights, and you can almost trace the path of the brush as it moved across the canvas in swift, deliberate strokes. Each star is not painted, but built, layered with concentric rings of yellow and white, surrounded by halos of softer blue. The sky itself is composed of long, curving lines that flow like currents in a river, each stroke distinct, each one visible. Vincent did not blend these strokes into smooth gradients. He let them remain raw and visible, so that the viewer could feel the energy of his hand moving across the surface. This was a radical departure from the polished academic painting that dominated European art in the 19th century. Traditional painters concealed their brushwork, striving for invisible technique and lifelike illusion. Vincent did the opposite. He made the brushstroke itself a subject, a presence, an emotional force. In doing so, he helped open the door to what we now call Expressionism, a movement that would shape much of 20th century art. Researchers studying his materials have found that Vincent used pigments such as cobalt blue, ultramarine, lead white, and a yellow made from chrome and zinc. Some of these pigments have shifted slightly over the past century and a half, the chrome yellows darkening, the ultramarines fading subtly. The painting we see today is not exactly the painting Vincent saw in June of 1889, and yet its power remains undimmed. Across more than 130 years, those thick, deliberate strokes still pulse with the urgency of the hand that placed them there, a hand that worked quickly, perhaps feverishly, in a small room overlooking a quiet southern French valley. Consider now the colours Vincent chose and how they speak to one another across the canvas. The painting is dominated by blue, but it is not a single blue. It is a chorus of blues, ranging from the deep, almost black indigo at the corners to the soft cerulean shimmer surrounding each star, to the cool greenish blue of the village rooftops and the distant hills. Against this vast field of blue, Vincent placed his yellows and whites, the brilliant gold of the moon and stars, the warm glow of village windows, the pale ivory swirls in the upper sky. Yellow and blue are what colour theorists call complementary opposites, sitting across from each other on the colour wheel, and when placed side by side, they intensify one another. The yellow looks more luminous, the blue more profound. Vincent understood this principle deeply. In his letters, he wrote of seeking the perfect contrast, the pairing of warm and cool that would make a painting vibrate with feeling. Notice also the touches of green that appear in unexpected places, in the cypress tree most prominently, but also in the subtle shifts of the sky itself, where blue tilts toward turquoise and back again. These greens act as bridges, easing the eye between the warm and cool tones, softening what might otherwise be too stark a contrast. The overall effect is one of profound harmony, even though the painting depicts what could be read as chaos, a sky in turmoil, a tree on fire, a village dwarfed by cosmic forces. The colours hold everything together. They make the chaos beautiful. And in this, perhaps, lies one of the painting's deepest secrets. Vincent was not painting what the night sky looked like. He was painting what it felt like to stand beneath such a sky and feel oneself small and yet connected, finite, and yet part of something vast and luminous. Through colour and stroke and form, he translated an inner experience into something we can still see, more than a century later, and recognize as our own. Notice now the cypress tree, that towering green-black flame rising from the lower left corner of the painting, reaching upward as if to bridge the earth and the swirling heavens above. In the language of Provence, where Vincent painted this work in June of 1889, cypress trees held a particular meaning, for they were traditionally planted in cemeteries, their dark forms standing as silent guardians over the resting places of the dead. And yet, Vincent saw them differently, writing in a letter to his brother Theo that the cypress was as beautiful in line and proportion as an Egyptian obelisk, a splash of black in a sunny landscape, one of the most interesting dark notes he could imagine. He painted cypresses obsessively during his time at the St. Paul de Montréal Asylum, returning to them again and again, fascinated by their flame-like silhouettes. In the Starry Night, the cypress is enormous, exaggerated far beyond its natural scale, occupying a vertical column of the canvas that stretches from the village rooftops nearly to the moon itself. Some art historians have suggested that this towering tree serves as a connector between the mortal world below and the cosmic mystery above, a green bridge between life and whatever lies beyond. Others read the cypress more simply as a compositional anchor, a dark vertical that balances the horizontal sweep of the sky and grounds the eye amid all that swirling motion. Vincent himself never explained the choice in writing, leaving us to wonder, across more than a century of distance, what passed through his mind as he layered those dark green strokes against the deep blue night. What we do know is that he found in cypresses a kind of companionship during his most difficult months, painting them in sunshine and starlight, in wheat fields and beneath cloudy skies. They became, in some quiet way, fellow travelers in his visual exploration of the world, dark and patient witnesses to whatever beauty he could still find amid the storms of his mind. And here, on this canvas, the cypress stands eternal, reaching forever upward into a sky that will never stop turning. Below the swirling sky, and beside the towering cypress, lies the village, small and quiet, nestled into the gentle curves of the hills. Look closely at this little settlement, with its modest houses arranged in soft clusters, their windows glowing with small squares of warm yellow and orange light. At the center of the village rises a church spire, slender and pointed, reaching upward toward the stars, though falling far short of them. Art historians have long observed that this church does not match any building actually visible from Vincent's window at the asylum in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. The view from his room looked out upon wheat fields and the Alpes mountains, but no such village with such a spire stood in that direction. Many scholars believe Vincent painted the church from memory, drawing perhaps upon the Dutch Reformed churches of his childhood in the Netherlands, with their simple pointed steeples rising above flat northern landscapes. If this interpretation is correct, then the Starry Night is not purely a painting of what Vincent saw, but rather a tender weaving together of present observation and remembered home, of southern France and northern memory, of the asylum window and the villages of his youth. Notice how the village sits in stillness, how no figures walk its streets, how the smoke does not rise from its chimneys. Everything in this painted town rests, as if the entire community has surrendered itself to sleep beneath the watchful turning of the sky. Only the church windows and a few scattered house windows glow with light, suggesting perhaps a single soul awake somewhere within, or simply the warmth of a fire left burning through the night. The contrast between the wild, swirling motion of the heavens above and the calm, ordered quietude of the village below is one of the painting's deepest harmonies. Up there, the cosmos churns with energy, with eddies of stars and rivers of moonlight. Down here, the small lives of small people rest in peace, gathered together in the soft dark, holding the warmth of home against the immense and beautiful night. And so, as our journey through the starry night begins to soften, let your thoughts grow lighter, like clouds drifting beneath a high, cold moon. Tonight, we have wandered through the constellations of ancient peoples, paused at Van Gogh's barred window in Provence, listened to the slow furnace at the heart of every star, and felt the gentle hand of the atmosphere shaping all that distant light into something kind enough for human eyes. There is no need to remember any of it. The sky will remember for you. It has been remembering faithfully for billions of years, and it will still be there above your roof in the morning, quietly shining behind the blue curtain of day. For now, let your breathing slow. Let the weight of your body settle, like sediment in still water. The stars are doing what they have always done. You are exactly where you need to be. And the night, vast and patient, is holding you gently in its enormous, glittering hands. If tonight's journey has helped you drift, you are warmly invited to stay with us. Thank you for spending your night with Let's Learn While You Sleep. Subscribe and come back tomorrow night. We'll be here. Sleep well.